Lauren. Waking up on Monday, I was overwhelmed by the prospect of taking on the day. Throwing on my best business casual outfit, I smiled at myself in the mirror. Confidence is key, isn't that what they always say? As I taxied my way through the city, I couldn't help but feel a great sense of opportunity, a chance to change my path in life, a chance to pay those mounting hospital bills, a chance to save my father. But when I entered Campbell Industries, the building was empty. Unlike the day of my interview, the lobby of the office was unreasonably quiet. Silence permeated the space as I made my way to the elevators, trying to keep my breathing steady. The sound of my heels against the marble floors echoed across the lobby. Something was definitely up. And when the elevator doors opened, I was met with the silver-eyed gaze of the devil himself. After catching my breath from the shock of seeing him in this empty space, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake by not addressing his presence. "Good morning, sir," I gasped, unsure if I should enter the elevator or catch a new one. "Feel free to join me, Miss Hart. I don't bite." A slight smirk crossed his lips as he took in my appearance. Stepping into the elevator slowly, I distanced myself from his looming presence, attempting to stay out of his menacing gaze. Instead, he turned my way and stepped forward, placing himself just inches away from my spot in the far corner of the elevator. Sir, I hardly think this is appropriate." Leaning in, he ran his strong hand across my cheek, causing chills to cover my skin. My body was humming, despite my fears. Was this some kind of test? "Oh, Miss Hart, do you really think I hired you for a silly assistant position?" I gasped inwardly as his palm cupped my ass firmly, pulling my body into his against my will. I took a moment to appreciate how muscular his arms and chest were. "You're all mine. From here on out, I own you." Pushing him off forcefully, I was practically gasping for air as the elevator doors opened on the top floor. When a gap appeared in the doors, I gazed out at the empty office of Mason Campbell, just as I remembered it on the day I interviewed. With one key difference. My father's hospital bed was parked in the far corner of the room, his monitors blinking and his heart rate keeping steady time. Dad, what the fuck was going on here? Racing to his side, I grasped his hand as his tired eyes met mine. "Oh, Lauren." He looked like he's on the verge of tears as he pulled me close. "You need to trust him. You must follow his requests. He's going to save me. He's going to protect you." When I turned towards Mason, he was gone. Except the office door was slowly opening, white light flooding the space, and in walked a gorgeous woman, dressed head to toe in diamonds. What kind of fever dream was this? As I gazed at the woman entering the room, I took a step towards Dad. "Hello, darling," murmured the woman as she approached me. "Is she—" That's when it hit me. "Mom?" It couldn't be. But as I reached towards Dad to get his attention, his heart rate monitor flatlined. His blue-eyed gaze glazed over as he stared down the woman he called his wife. I scream, and I woke up still screaming, my body drenched in a cold sweat. I couldn't believe I just experienced a full-fledged nightmare about my first day at Campbell Industries. And what was it all about? The fear of Mason Campbell definitely stemmed from my panic and general attraction to the man. But why was my father involved? And my mother? The stress of starting this job and the pressure of taking care of Dad was definitely getting to me. Adrenaline pumping through my veins, I'm actually really excited for the day. Or at least I was, prior to that weird dream. Nerves and excitement were pulsing through me. I was still trying to wrap my head around the fact that I was going to work for Mason Campbell. I kept pinching myself, thinking it must be a dream. Or maybe a horrible nightmare. When I told Beth, my best friend and roomie, she had the audacity to laugh in my face and called me a liar. She didn't believe I could ever talk to Mason, that I wasn't important enough to exchange words with him and be in his presence. If I said I wasn't deeply insulted, I would be lying. She was talking as if Mason was a god who could not be approached. But let me tell you something, Mason wasn't a god or an angel. He wasn't someone who would give out candy to kids and say nice words that would make anyone feel warmth in the stomach. He was the devil. Mason was someone who would snatch candy from little kids and eat it in front of them. He was someone who would push you in front of a moving car. He was someone who would say a few words and make someone have a heart attack or leave a scar in their heart. There was one good thing about him, though. He was a pretty sight that I couldn't deny. Dreaming about him was enough to raise my heart rate. I can't imagine what being in his actual presence would do to me. Why were beautiful men rude, cold, and heartless? Anyway, Mason was the biggest wanker of them all. The wanker straight out said I wasn't smart. He dared make fun of my school. It was all lovely compared to what he had said about me having zero experience. I could only imagine how awful it was going to be to work for him. Maybe he had been in a bad mood the other time. Maybe he really wasn't that bad and I had misjudged him. However he was, I was going to be the best assistant he had ever worked with. I wouldn't give him a reason to lash out at me and sneer down at me. I needed this job. I must admit the paycheck was worth the stress of working for him. I'd pay down my father's hospital debts in no time and get him the best care while I still could. He would be okay. I just knew it, and I had a good feeling about this job. Putting the dream behind me, I got up quickly, dressed, and put on a happy, brave face. Not bothering to wake Beth and tell her I was leaving because the bitch might say something I wouldn't like, I grabbed everything and left our flat. In my opinion, what I was wearing was the best thing I could find in my closet. I could totally wear a nice dress for a wedding or a special occasion, but I couldn't believe I was wearing it to work. Neither could I believe the hostility I saw when I stepped foot in Campbell Industries. I was just grateful that the place was as busy as ever. After my weird premonition with the empty lobby, I was happy to see everyone, even if they weren't happy to see me. Apparently, word had gotten out that I was the boss's new assistant. That hadn't happened in a while. Ignoring the few glares I got, I pressed my sweaty finger on the button that would take me to Mr. Campbell's floor. When the doors slid open, I was ecstatic to see that I wouldn't be alone in the elevator. No, today was off to a much better start than it had been in the dream. The minute the door slid open, I walked out, my steps nervous. If my legs had a mind of their own, they would have bolted right out of there and left me legless. When I stepped foot in the office space, I didn't know where the hell I would go. I couldn't just barge into Mr. Campbell's office and demand to know where my desk was. Besides, I didn't think he was here yet. Lauren Hart? I turned at the sound of my name and came face to face with a beautiful woman. She was so gorgeous and she dressed so well. I was envious of her. All I wanted to do was pull her hair and ruin her skirt and blouse. I wanted to mess this woman up and I didn't know why. Oh, I knew why. She looked so much better than me. God knows what she saw when she looked at me. I know what I see when I look at myself. She seemed to be 24 or 25. Yes, I answered politely. I even put a smile out there. Did she smile back? No. My name is Jade. I'm a little surprised to see you here so early, though it's a good thing. Mr. Campbell doesn't like when his employees come late to work. I wanted to say, haven't you come a bit earlier than me, bitch? But instead I smiled again. I'm sure no one does. It's a good thing I'm always an early riser. Mr. Campbell doesn't need to worry about me coming late. She nodded her head as she chewed on her pen and decided to give me a once-over, clearly not liking what she saw. No one told me what Mr. Campbell's new assistant looks like, but I've got to say I'm a little disappointed. I expected much more, but I guess he took pity on you. If I were him, I would take pity on you too. Scratch messing her up. I wanted to bloody murder her and bury her 6 feet under where her corpse would rot to bones and skull. Were the boss and employees all the same? They all act like they are better than everyone. I smiled widely. I guess he saw something he didn't see in anyone else. I must be lucky then. The murderous look on her face gave me a little bit of satisfaction. Whatever. Follow me and I will show you to your desk. I followed behind her closely, my eyes glaring daggers at her back. The minute she turned, I plastered a sweet smile on my face. She pointed to a desk that had a white laptop on it. The desk was pushed far up against the wall, beside a large double door. You're going to be sitting over here, she said. You can put one personal thing on your desk because Mr. Campbell doesn't like too much of personalization. Your job is to answer the phone and complete his tasks. Do you understand? Yes. Very good. Welcome to Campbell Industry. Let's see how long you last. I bit my tongue and forced breath through my nose. I assure you it'll be longer than you will. I watched her eyebrow twitch, but she didn't say anything. She walked away, leaving me to settle in. It didn't take 30 minutes before Mr. Campbell walked in like a storm ready to suck you away into its vortex. His face held no emotion, and those stone-cold eyes could end your existence. I stood transfixed, unable to tear my eyes away from the sheer muscling of his arms, chest, and legs, the way his blue Armani suit clung to his body like a second skin, just like in my dream, but up close and personal. There was something perfectly lethal and predatory in his movements as he walked. My heart pounded with fascination. He was a powerful man, incredible in every way, and the mere sight of him now, in his glory, nearly brought me to my knees. It was as if I was seeing him for the first time. Everyone nodded good morning to him, but he ignored them and walked past with grace such as I had never seen in anyone as he went into his office. He was so rude. I stayed at my desk for a few minutes before I gathered my courage and approached his office. I knocked on his door once, twice, and I got nothing in return. I knocked again, loudly this time. "What?" His voice was deep and thunderous. It felt as if it rumbled mightily inside the building. Swallowing bile that had risen in my throat, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. I walked inside his cold office and closed the door behind me. "Good morning, sir," I greeted him, my heart pounding in my chest. Mr. Campbell slowly raised his head to look at me. He appeared more frightening than I could have imagined, and I couldn't control the shudder that shook my body when those silver eyes were fixed on me. There wasn't anything familiar about his stare. I sucked in my breath. His gaze roamed over me, an almost lazy action. I sensed boredom. I sensed annoyance and an almost icy distance that set him apart. Our eyes stayed locked for one long, nerve-shattering moment. 100 feelings went through me in that instant. It was as if everything else in the world stood still. This man, he was frightening, and I might have accidentally sold my soul to him. "Yes? Can I help you?" he barked. I stared at him, unable to understand what he meant by that. Was I not allowed to come to greet him until he needed me? Before I could say anything, he fired more questions at me. "How did you get here? Who let you in?" He pressed an intercom and spoke into it. "Who let this woman in? Do I pay you to let any stranger come into my office? You're asking me what woman? You're fired." He was raising his voice at the poor woman on the other side of the phone. "Please, Mr. Campbell, you hired me to be your assistant. Lauren Hart, remember?" I asked in a choked, pleading voice. My heart was pounding loudly and I couldn't seem to move. My deepest instinct warned me not to anger this man any further. He was like an unforgiving storm, a force not to be reckoned with. Mason raised his eyebrows as he sized me up, pointing his pen at me in realization. "You certainly look different. Not as bad as you did the other day. It's progress." "Yes, sir," I answered, fighting to keep my tone light and simple. "I'll try and live up to this company's expectations." Finally moving his eyes away from me, he retorted, "I don't see how that is going to be possible, Miss Hart." I watched him scribble something down on a piece of paper. "Take this." I quickly moved to take the paper from him. Our fingers would have touched in the process if he hadn't let go of it immediately before it happened. "That's my email and the password. Answer all my emails. Ignore ones that aren't relevant. Don't schedule a meeting without consulting me first. Do not, under any circumstances, Miss Hart, make any of my emails go public. Keep my emails private. If I find out you've discussed them with anyone, family or friend, I assure you, you will very much regret it." My heart began to beat fast, and I hated the fact that he could evoke this anxiety in me. And he was doing it intentionally. Of course he was. "Every morning by exactly 9 a.m., you'll get me my tea, not coffee. I like it black. It shouldn't be too cold or too hot. All the files I need to sign should be at my desk before I get here. You don't come into my office, and no visitors are allowed from 12 to 1. You get my lunch from Rosier Restaurant. It's a 1-hour drive, and I don't care how you get there. Just ask for my usual. Keep in mind that I need it hot and on my table by 2. If it turns cold, I'll deduct the price from your salary." Is he serious? God, he's so bossy. Look at him sitting there stating his orders like he owned the earth or something. Like he owned me. The effects from my dream this morning were still having an impact on my day. Bummer. God, if this man did own the world, we'd all be doomed. I hadn't spent long in his presence, but I could tell the world would suffer at his hands. Are you listening to me? He looked outraged. Anger emanated from his face, his gaze traveling over me critically. Something dark flickered across his expression that had my stomach churning. Swallowing, I nodded my head. His eyes narrowed. You don't nod. You speak when you're spoken to. Do you understand? Yes, sir. I looked down before looking up at him. The fierce expression on his face filled me with terror. He continued with his cold and unforgiving tone. I took it upon myself to give this to you. He threw what looked like a manual at me. Read it. Follow it if you want to be here in a week. I promise I won't disappoint you, I said quietly. I don't care if you disappoint me, Miss Hart. I'd be pleased to see that you did. It would only prove what I think about you. Don't think you've officially made it into Campbell Industry. You are on trial. Any mistake will get you out of here quicker than you can blink. As I said, you are not the only one who would love to have this job. Many people would. People with more talent than you. He entwined his fingers in front of him. And don't you get it into your head that you're anything special. Son of a bitch. A reply sprang to my lips, but he silenced me with his raised hand. That will be all. I turned around and quietly left the office. I knew Mason Campbell was a lot of things, and a rude man was one of them, but I never knew he was this rude. Without making any eye contact with anyone, I walked over to my desk. I sat down, counting to 10 before I moved my attention back to the employee manual I was given. At exactly 8:55, I rushed to get Mr. Campbell's tea. I paused, trying to remember if he told me how much sugar he wanted in it, or if he wanted any at all. I took a major risk and didn't put sugar in his tea. This could either save me or get me kicked out of the company. When he gave me permission to enter his office, I did so as calmly as I could. I kept the tea in front of him and waited to be asked to leave. Mr. Campbell took his time to finish up on his laptop before picking up the tea. I sighed in relief when he didn't start screaming about the lack of sugar. You may go, he said icily. He still hadn't looked at me. You're welcome, sir, I said, turning to leave the office. His voice stopped me from moving. What did you just say? There was disbelief in his tone, anger, a wave of terrifying anger that had my legs shaking. Are you being sarcastic with me, Miss Hart? I shook my head, trying to point out the exact moment my senses left my body. I wasn't being sarcastic. How could I be when I knew I had a boss like him? It was simply an instinct that had made me say it. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean any harm. I couldn't count how many times I had apologized from the moment I first met him, and something told me there was more to come. He narrowed his eyes, trying to break me down and prove I was weak and not capable of handling the pressure. At least, that was what I thought he was doing. Don't test me again, or you're going to regret it. Understood, Miss Hart? I let out a low breath and nodded slowly. You may go. I dashed out of there, breathing properly when I was out of his glaring stare. A low chuckle began, and I rotated around to look at the culprit. A tall, lean guy was staring at me, his lips curved into a smirk. He had short, dark hair at the sides, and the spike in the middle was a bit long and messy. When he saw me looking, he crossed over to my space. Congratulations, his deep voice said with a hint of a joke. You survived 2 visits to his office. Calls for a celebration. I couldn't help but smile for 2 reasons. 1, because I knew he was probably telling the truth, and 2, because I knew I would like him. He had the friendliest face I'd seen in the office. Doing a little curtsy that earned another chuckle from him, I said, Would you like to engrave that on a cup and deliver it to my desk? Oh, clever. You're going to drive your own satisfaction. Sold. I extended my hand, my smile getting wider. I'm Lauren Hart. Ginger-haired guy released one hand from his cup and shook my hand. Nice to meet you, Lauren. I'm Aaron Hardy. It's really nice to see someone coming out of the boss's office without a tear. You could say that I'm brave. He nodded, tilting his head to the other side to study me. Or stupid. Why did you take the job? He asked, and before I could reply, he cut me off with an exclamation. I think I got it. It's the paycheck, isn't it? It's always the paycheck. I rolled my eyes. Something like that. I need the money. You're awfully nice to me. How is that possible? Everyone either hates me or is yet to hate me. They are all so uptight. Like people, please take a chill pill. He laughed, his shoulders shaking. Trust me when I say they're jealous of you. Mr. Campbell doesn't usually hire, excuse my choice of words, someone like you. He likes his employees with high class, people who wouldn't embarrass his company, but they think you might be special to him. I snorted. That's so stupid. He hates me. He hates you just as much as he hates everyone, Aaron said. It's not personal. I wonder why. And that, my dear Lauren, is what we all keep wondering, he said, winking at me. Let's get back to work before we have to stay back for an hour after work. I stepped beside him, looking surprised. Are you serious? Nope, he replied, popping the pea. He's not that much of a bastard. I stopped walking, giving him my best, are you kidding me look. He turned around and shrugged. Okay, maybe he's a bastard. A grade A bastard if you ask me, I said. Someone cleared their throat and I froze in shock, my heart going a mile a minute. It was Aaron's chuckles that seemed to snap me out of it. Oh my God! He doubled over with laughter. You should have seen your face. You thought it was him. It isn't? No, but you should be careful with your words. A green-haired girl smiled at me, swinging her arm around Aaron's neck. Is this the new girl? I stood straight, pushing my shoulders up and stared straight into her eyes. She chuckled. Damn, girl, I don't bite, she said, amused at me trying to stand my ground. I immediately relaxed, figuring that she meant no harm. No sign of disdain. I'm Athena. I raised a brow. She grinned. My mom is weird. I smiled. Lauren, you have green hair and you're not fired. I knew for a fact that Mason would never, ever hire someone with green hair. That's because he can't fire me. I'm his auntie. What? But you don't look like a day over. 23? Athena asked. Yeah, I get that a lot. He's older than me, but I'm his aunt, blah, blah. His mom is my half-sister. Wow. She must be the only person he would be nice to. Athena stared at my dazed face. Oh, honey, just because I'm his auntie doesn't mean I don't get his shit too. Yeah, but you're like the only person he respects, Aaron said. She shrugged like it wasn't that much of a big deal. I never thought Mr. Campbell was capable of respecting anyone. His enormous ego, the size of the earth, wouldn't be able to handle such a thing. For a man who demanded respect everywhere he went, it was an odd thing to hear. Let's go, Aaron said. I've been assigned to make sure you get to his next meeting early. My eyebrows shot high. No shit, really? So he's decided that I'm not capable of being on time and he's assigned a babysitter? And you've been given the dumbest task of escorting me to the meeting? He drew himself up to his full, lean height, a teasing smile on his face. I'm messing with you, Lauren. He doesn't have that time or the energy to do that. I just don't want you to get fired. You don't know what will happen if that happens. I'd heard rumors that you'd be lucky to ever work again. Oh, I think I have a fair idea, I said. But that's just stupid. Why on earth would he have so much influence on people? You underestimate the power of Mason Campbell, Lauren. I walked beside Aaron to the conference room, and to my surprise, someone had already beaten me to it. Jade. She was sitting on the chair close to the boss's seat. I stifled a laugh, but I guess I didn't try hard enough. She looked up and glared at us. Guess someone is more eager than you to please the boss, Aaron commented. Don't try too hard, Jade. It will only be a complete waste. Shut up, she fired at him. I didn't say anything and found a seat at the end of the table and slipped into it. Aaron took the chair next to me. At exactly 8 o'clock, people began coming in and filling in all of the empty chairs until there was one left. At exactly 3 minutes past 8, Mr. Campbell walked in. We rose from our seats, and when he sat down, we followed suit. I tried so damn hard to stay clear of his sight, but not enough, since I could still see his face clearly. He wasn't smiling, and he wasn't frowning either. He looked serious and determined. Everyone else gave all of their thoughts and attention to him. Power, leadership, and authority were his. I looked away from his penetrating gaze and focused my attention on the view outside. Miss Hart. It was just so beautiful. I could stare at it all day. Miss Hart. Lauren, Aaron hissed, elbowing me in the ribs. Ouch, what? I glared at him, rubbing the place he had elbowed me. It hurt. I hoped he didn't bruise me. Then I noticed all eyes were on me. I wanted to hide under the table. Not paying attention during your first meeting. What else do you intend to show us in one day, Miss Hart? He mocked. Mr. Campbell's eyes were on me, his hands crossed in front of him as he regarded me. His dark blue Armani suit somehow made him appear broader and taller than ever. The very air seemed to hum and sizzle with the power of his presence, forceful and vital, so very bold and demanding. My pulse suddenly beat rapidly at his attention, yet I was determined he didn't know the effect he had on me, or did he? I raised my chin and I stared back with what I hoped was the gaze of someone cool and confident. Sorry, it won't happen again. I was glad I didn't stammer and show a sign of weakness. A beat of silence. Miss Willow, Jade was quick to answer. Yes, sir? She sounded annoyingly sweet. She looked like a dog who had seen a treat. God, couldn't she at least try to look less excited? Exchange seats with Miss Hart. Her face fell in shock. I was just as surprised as she was. Jade slipped out of her chair and Aaron had to elbow me again before I got out of my chair. With every step I took, the knot in my stomach tightened. I would have much preferred to stay where I was. The fact that all eyes were on me, especially Mr. Campbell's, made me uneasy. My steps slowed, but I didn't stop moving. I took Jade's chair. I was out in the open for everyone to see. I wanted to sink down to the floor and disappear. Athena was there as well. Her brows shot high up in surprise, then she winked at me. I glanced at Aaron, who wore an easy smile. I knew that everyone in the room was startled by Mr. Campbell's decision, though they did not say so out loud. And Jade was giving me a penetrating death stare. I looked up at Mason Campbell. His gaze was still fixed on me, somehow making me feel totally insignificant, but also like the only person in this entire room. When the meeting wrapped, Mason Campbell stayed seated while everyone else flowed out of the room. Attempting to make a quick escape, I moved in front of Athena to block me from his penetrating eyes. But that didn't last very long. He cleared his throat and his low voice growled above the din. Miss Hart, a word. I turned abruptly, trying to stop my hands from shaking as I stood before him. Not paying attention will not be tolerated here at Campbell Industries. I won't tolerate your gaze wandering no matter how desperately you struggle to focus. A smile crossed his lips as he stepped closer, closing the gap between us. It is your job to remain at my side through all business meetings and beyond, if need be. You're all mine. From here on out, I own you. I was in for a lot more trouble than I had expected, and this was only day one.